Right then, this video's a bit of a rant, so enjoy it whilst you can. I've been asked to look at this chainsaw. It's Farm Boss Stihl 038. They're normally quite nice saws, quite grunty, old style. Anyway, it became immediately apparent that huge chainsaw abuse had been going on. The air filter area was totally blocked. Fine dust, and fine dust obviously means that the chain's not been cut in correctly. The throttle actually doesn't open up more than halfway at the moment, so the butterfly in the carburettor is at about 45 degrees. I'm going to have to investigate that. Whether or not we've got some damage in the carburettor, or whether or not all the linkages are packed solid with this dust, we shall wait to see. But on inspection of the chain, it became apparent that they don't know how to sharpen the chain. Anyway, so this is what the rant's about. We're going to just go through the process. At some point I'm going to put a video up on chain identification and selection of the correct file size, because I'm finding that candidates need the refresher. In certain situations the information doesn't seem to be hammered home. They're told once and they're expected to remember all the technical details. So let's just go through this particular video about one variety of poor chain sharpening. Right, here's a sorry question, and I've just set up this little sharpening area, but just whilst we're here, here's a quick way to make yourself a chain sharpening vise. 2 bits of box section, inch box section, a bit of flat plate, a 7/8 or inch bolt, weld the nut on there, and that's it. I just put a piece of flat here so that there's room down here for the chain when you clamp the bar in there. Very easy to make. If you were being generous, you'd say 20 minutes by the time you dug around for the bits of steel, cut them to length, messed about this, that and the other. And this bolt, of course, is just the head's just sawn off and just drilled a hole through and a Tommy bar put in. Captive, because guaranteed that people will lose the Tommy bar if it's not. Anyway, that's that. Here's the chain. When I looked at the chain, it became immediately apparent that screwdriver or something, that the gullet here is not big enough. Right, we'll zoom in. So it became apparent that that gullet there is very small. Just put the chain brake on to hold it in place. So effectively either they used the wrong size file, or more that I suspect what they've done is they tried to file like this, with the guide not touching the depth gauge at all. So just to explain this guide here is designed so that 1/5 of the file is above the top of the tooth. I'll explain that in a moment. So the guide has got to sit on the tooth and on the depth gauge at the front, like that. If you do that, then you've got more than 20%, 25% of the file above the top of the tooth, and effectively what you end up doing is creating almost a 90-degree angle on your teeth. so they scrape rather than cut. So let's go to the demonstration. I think we're going to have to zoom out a bit. There's a cutter. Okay, let's just turn it round. And you see this angle here, that angle there, should be about 60 degrees. There. So your file goes in like that. And let's just see if I can... Your file goes in like... This is just a bit of wood that I've cut to give an idea. And can you see that a good 20% or so of the file is above the top of the cutter, like that. I don't think we can see that very well. Like that. Let's turn it round. Maybe that looks better. There we go. This bit of log's not quite round, but now you can see that a certain amount is above, and it's about 20–25%. But what happens is, if you allow the file to roll like that, then obviously, I've cut a small piece, it ends up doing that, and you end up having almost this going straight down into the gullet. So you need that undercut like that. Yeah, there's no point having the file up here because it won't cut. All it will do is scrape and create dust. So let's just zoom in on this tooth here. So we're just looking at this one here. Can you see it's actually leaning back? It'll be difficult to show you the sharpening process, but I'm going to sharpen that one, and you all sharpen the teeth on the opposite side to you. So therefore the camera is on the opposite side of the chain to me, so you sharpen this one, and then when you want to sharpen the next one on the facing the other way, you turn the whole saw around. So can you see now that's leaning back like mad? And I'm going to put this at an angle. You probably can't see, but let's give it a sharpen. And I'm using a 5.5mm file here because this is a 3/8 chain. That's 3/8 of an inch pitch. You can hear it cutting away, and of course the quickest way to blunt a file is to pull the file backwards. Now, can you see, instead of being leaning backwards, you've got an undercut there. And that, of course, will cut a shaving rather than scraping dust. Let's move on to the next one. Which one are you doing? That one there. So you can see again it's leaning backwards. This forward edge, the gullet is too small and it's leaning backwards. If I take the file out of the guide, we might be able to see better. That's where the file is. That's where it naturally sits, and it's halfway up. So if you file with halfway up the file, you're creating a square edge. Hope that makes sense there. That's where it naturally wants to sit. Let's go right to the end of the file. Can you see how it's far too high? So never ever pull the file backwards, because you'll wish you hadn't. Let's see if we got a better shape there. It's not quite there, but can you see now there's an undercut? Like this. See, there's an undercut. And of course the muck goes down, the shavings go down in there. So now this tooth will actually cut, but it wants a bit more work on it, yeah. But that's the theory. And as I say, I will do a chain ident and file ident. But basically, if you've got a 3/8 pitch chain, you use either a 5.2 or a 5.5mm file. If you've got a 0.325, which is 0.325 of an inch pitch chain, you use a 4.8. And if you have a 3/8 pico, which is a 3/8 pitch chain but small teeth, you use a 4mm file. And so to complete the sharpening, we've reprofiled this tooth, so this front edge should be nice and sharp. But who's to say what the depth gauges are like? Now the depth gauges, they run along the bottom of the previous cut and regulate the amount of timber that this cutter removes. So they're marginally lower than the cutting edge. Because the cutting edge or the cutter slopes backwards, as you sharpen it, it gets lower. So you have to lower the depth gauge, but by the right amount. And on the chain ident, again, we'll talk about the right depth gauge setting tool. This one, 0.65 of a mil. That's the step between the inside of there, and the top of there. So it goes on like that. And the depth gauge, if it was too high, would stick up through there and you'd file it off. Well, it's not. So to compound the sins, they've lowered the depth gauge. Ah, that one's just the slightest file. Now these will wear, so it's a matter of feeling and then filing a bit and then feeling again. That was only the slightest little tad off that, and because you want to slope the front of that depth gauge, so you would cover the front of the cutter like that and then just roll the front edge. Let's go back to that previous cutter if we can see it. There it is. That's the one that was sharpened. Stick like that and just roll the front edge of the depth gauge. Don't lower it anymore, but create a smooth ramp, because obviously this is part of the anti-kickback feature as well. The bigger that ramp is, the longer the ramp, the more of an anti-kickback feature it is. But you want it to come in contact with the wood. You don't want a big square edge scraping along. You want a smooth curve there, just to reduce friction. You know, well, there's no point having a big powerful saw if it's just driving loads of friction and everything's getting red hot. Hopefully this has addressed one or two issues.